Hello everyone, it is I, Mark SW. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to the fourth and final part of how to do model shots on a low budget. In episode 1 I did building the models, in episode 2 I set up the scenery, and in episode 3 last week I showed you guys some filming techniques. So for the last one, episode 4, I'm going to show you editing the effects. So in this video I'm going to show you some editing techniques. I'm not going to do like loads and loads of editing tutorials. The reason is because you may use different editing software to what I use. Because I use the Adobe software. I use Premiere for editing my videos and After Effects for adding in all these special effects. And I use the CS5 version. I know I should get an up-to-date version, but it is quite expensive. And of course this is about making model shots on a low budget, so we're going to stick with that. But what I can do is show you guys some basic editing techniques that I use when I edit my model shots. So starting with the blue screen and green screen effects. In previous videos I mentioned that when professionals want to do a flying vehicle, they would film in front of maybe a rolling sky. But if you don't have those facilities or resources, then you would use the green screen or blue screen effect. So just a quick reminder, you photograph your vehicle in front of a green screen or a blue screen, depending on what color your vehicle is. Now when you've taken the photographs of your vehicle, you can then download them to your computer and use image editing software to adjust it. So in my case, I'm going to paint the background all green, make it nice and solid and there are no loose bits. I use Adobe Photoshop for adjusting my images and for making my thumbnails. As you can see, I'm using the brush tool because I can adjust the size to get in those little corners. This I find very useful because on Photoshop you can use the magic wand which selects the same color, but it may select colours that you don't want it to select. Like in this fighter jet, it's selecting bits of green in the cockpit. We don't want that to happen. That's why I prefer to use the paintbrush. Once you've finished painting your background, you can then crop the image so you don't have too much background, because we want to focus on the aircraft, and then save it as a JPEG. Now, if you have After Effects like me, here's how you create your flying vehicle. Create a new composition or video timeline, load your background image, which is the sky, and your vehicle with the green background, or blue background, whichever. Now, go to your effects and select Key Light 1.2. Use the eyedropper to select the color that you want to get rid of. So bye-bye green background. You may have to make some adjustments if it's looking a bit transparent. Now for the moment we're just going to do a simple animation. I'm just going to make the jet fighter fly from one side of the screen to the other. So using the positioning, the size and rotation tools, I'm going to get it to the right position, size and angle that I want it to be at, and add a positioning keyframe. And then move the timeline cursor to how long I think the jet fighter should move for. Then reposition the fighter. I can also adjust the keyframes so I can add a bit of curvature to the movement. That sounds a bit right, so let's give this a try. Bit slow. Maybe if I move the keyframe a bit down a bit. Right, let's give it a try. That's better, that's more like it. That's how fast a jet fighter should go. But I think we can improve it. Let's give it a blur motion. So on After Effects, if you select the object that you want to blur when it's in motion and turn the blurring effect on, so now when you play the video, now that's more like it. So that's for filming in front of a static background. If you want to know how to do the rolling sky, I'll get to that in a minute, because there's another thing I need to cover about blue screen and green screen. Because as you know, I did that using an image of a vehicle on a green screen. But what if you have a video of a vehicle on a green screen or a blue screen? Well, for example, I filmed this helijet on a turntable in front of a blue screen. Now, if you use the key light effect on a video background, to be honest, it's not that effective. That's because I'm not using one of those special cameras that are designed to film in front of a blue screen or a green screen. But we can sort this out. First, if you put your video on a separate composition, then use the masking tool to select out the bits that you don't want. For example, the bottom of this turntable. You may have to invert the mask though. Now, if you go to color range and use the eyedropper to select which color you want to get rid of. And if it doesn't get rid of all the blue, use the eyedropper with the plus sign, which will allow you to remove several colors and not just one. So once I've removed most of the blue background, I can now create a new layer of a solid blue background. So now my helijet's on a blue background without any shadows or markings on it. It's nice and clean, you see. Here's a little advice. While your vehicle is still on a new composition, take the opportunity to make some adjustments. For example, at some point I want the helijet to stop turning, so I would duplicate the video, move the cursor to the point when I want the helijet to stop turning, then freeze frame the duplicated clip. Then with a bit of editing, I can make it look like that the helijet stops turning. And once you're satisfied with your new background and your vehicle on it, you can now create a new composition which will be the main video. So I want this helijet to land just outside a missile base. So again, like my aircraft, I adjust the size, the positioning, and the rotation so I can get everything right, and add the keyframes for the positioning of how I want it to move. Also, if I select the end keyframe, I can select an effect called ease in, which will allow the helijet to slow down, so it gives the impression it's having a smooth landing. And so the result should look something like this. Now, I will admit it's not 100% perfect, but given time and with a bit more editing, I think I can create something satisfactory. Now I'll show you how to create the rolling sky, because I mentioned in episode 3 the professionals would use like a conveyor belt to create their rolling sky. Well, if you don't have a conveyor belt, then no need to worry. So how to create your rolling sky? Well, first, create a long image and paint it blue. Then create a new layer. I'm going to call it Cloud 1. And using the brush tools, I'm going to create clouds. Now there are several YouTube tutorial videos on how to create clouds with the brush tool, but little advice, it's always a good idea to have several layers of clouds, because they're not all the same, because you may want to give the impression that your vehicle is flying through the clouds, or maybe it's flying above the clouds. It depends on how high the vehicle is flying, really. Which is why I also recommend you may want to do different layers of blue background. Now sometimes it's best to use the gradient tool for something like this, so you can create the different layers of Earth's atmosphere. Once you've finished designing your sky and clouds, save it all as a Photoshop file. Because if you save it as a JPEG, all the layers will be compressed together. You need all the layers to be separate when you load them into After Effects. Of course, if you use After Effects like I do. Now on After Effects, create a starting point for your clouds. You may want to add 1 or 2 layers. Then move the timeline cursor so you can position the clouds to where you want them to end. Put your flying vehicle in front of the clouds, and then when you play it back, it definitely looks like your vehicle is flying in the sky. And here's a little trick if you're using After Effects. If you go to Layers and create a new camera layer, and then rotate the camera, then you can create the illusion that your vehicle is diving or climbing. But this will only work if you switch the layers to 3D mode. And of course this technique will work with space as well. You just need a black background with lots of stars, and you have a rolling space background. You can also do a vertical version of your sky, because then you can use the gradient tool to go from light blue to black. This is very useful if you want to create maybe like a rocket launch or a vehicle re-entering Earth's atmosphere. Now we come on to the visual effects. These are useful for doing things like explosions if you haven't got the resources to do explosions in real life. And of course it's safer this way. Also, this technique is useful if you have a model that you want to keep but you don't want to destroy, although in your film it does explode. There are loads of websites where you can download visual effects for things like explosions, fire, debris, shattered glass and smoke, even the flame jets for flying vehicles. Most of them are royalty free, so what I'll do is I'll put in the description some websites and companies that do royalty free effects. One word of warning though, some effect companies you have to subscribe to if you want to use their effects, so I try to avoid them. I try and go for the effects that are 100% free. Now most of them are filmed on a black background, but don't worry, if you're using After Effects you can remove the black background by either switching the layer to Add or Screen. Usually Screen is much better. Then you can adjust the size. Maybe use the masking tool to give the bottom a feathered edge so it blends in more. So now it looks like my rocket base is on fire and the helijet's coming in to pick up survivors. Some special effects are already in editing software. I mentioned the more common ones like rain, snow and lightning. You can download these effects from other effects companies if you want something a bit more realistic, because I do admit the ones from editing software, they do require quite a lot of adjustments and editing to make them look more realistic, but you'll get there in the end. Keep in mind though, if you do use an older version of After Effects, then there are some effects that it doesn't have. Like one of them is the particle effect. This is very good for if you want to create the smoke trails coming out of the end of a missile or a rocket. Now some of the later versions of After Effects have them, but older versions don't. You can download effects that old After Effects doesn't have, but be extremely careful of where you download them from. Now in my scenery video I mentioned that the one scene I can't create is on the surface of water, an ocean scenery. I have to use editing software to create it. And now I'm going to show you guys how to create it. First of all you need to do is film water. So I've filmed some water. It's actually the sea. Now on After Effects I add in the sky background, whether it's real or a model, it's up to you. And then I add in the video of the water that I filmed. Resize it so I know what I'm doing. Now I switch the water video to 3D mode, and this way I can rotate it and resize the video in a way to look like the land, or in this case, the sea. And when I'm satisfied with the positioning, I can then use the curves to adjust the colouring to make it look a bit more blue, or as Fuzzy Bear once said, the big blue wet thing. So now it looks a bit more like the ocean, and when you play it back, it actually does look like the ocean. I don't know if other editing softwares have a 3D adjustment setting, but if they do, then do give this technique a try if you want to create an ocean. Also, going back to when I did underwater shots, I mentioned that the professionals would usually film in front of a fish tank full of water. But if you don't have a fish tank, there is a simple way. All you need to do is film your underwater scene as normal, create a solid blue layer, and make it slightly transparent. So now it looks like the scenery is underwater. And there are several YouTube tutorials you can find to make it even more look like it's underwater. So once you're satisfied with all your filming and your effects and everything's all sorted, now comes the part where you need to add sound, because model shots are only good if they have good sound effects. Of course, you should try and use sound effects that are royalty free. For example, I use some sound effects from Free Sounds because it's all free and you don't need to pay for any of it. I also try and use sound effects that have been used multiple times in other productions. For example, take the Wilhelm scream. That's the scream that goes, "Ah!" Now you see, that scream was not used in all of George Lucas's films. It's used in many films. In fact, there are some YouTube montage videos of that scream being used. If one film company had used that scream, then it would have been copyrighted and no one else could have used it. But it's used in many film companies, so logically it must be free to use. I mean, it's common sense really, isn't it? For my model shots, I like to use the sound effects from Sin Sounds, or Sign Sounds, or I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but that's how you spell it. These are sound effects that are used in many mid to late 20th century films and TV shows. It's an impressive collection, and because they're used by different companies, logically they're free to use. To take an example, this explosion sound effect. Now, here's a list of all the TV shows and films that use that sound effect. So most of the sound effects from the library are free, but you can always double check just in case. In fact, even the BBC have done some CDs of sound effects. They should be free to use, but best to double check just in case if you're unsure. But with the right sound effects and with good editing, you could end up with model shots like these. So now there's only one last thing we need to cover, the costs. Because I know some of you are going to ask, is this definitely within a budget? Can I afford to do model shots? Well, my answer, it depends on what it is you want to film and whether you want to do more model shots. And that's my honest answer. Let's say you want to do a short film with model shots, say 5 to 10 minutes long. You're looking at around £50 to £300 worth of model shots. It would cost more if you want to do more short films with model shots, especially if you want to change the locations, because remember, not all scenery locations are the same. The budget could reach the thousands in two ways. Firstly, as I mentioned, equipment. If you want a new camera or better editing software, you may have to even buy a new computer to cope with the new software. The second way it can be expensive is depending on the models you want to use in your projects. So say if you want to use the Jerry Anderson Konami models from Japan, they're really nice, but they are collectibles, so they would cost a lot of money. And of course they're coming from another country, so it costs even more to transfer them here. But if you do want to do model shots for your projects, and if you want to continue doing them, then it's always a good idea to create a money chart and maybe a product list. Make a list of all the modeling equipment and kits and scenery that you want to collect, and then you can keep an eye on the budget so you know how much you're spending on it. But I hope these 4 videos have given you guys ideas on how to do your own model shots, and I hope I've proved that it is possible on a very low budget. And if you've enjoyed this video, you know what to do. Do give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when I next upload a video. And do leave comments down below and any questions you have, and I'll do my best to answer them and give you some advice on doing your model shots. Someone did ask, will I actually do a video of me making a model vehicle? Well, not just yet, because first I've got to design a vehicle first, and also I've got to set up my workshop, because my house has been renovated, so now I'm going to get a proper workshop. But I'll let you guys know when I do build a model vehicle. So thanks again for watching, happy filming, and I'll see you next time. Over and out.